The journalist is Hannah Nathanson, who spent the past year reporting on the White House's cuts to the federal workforce and its efforts to cut spending. In the early hours of January 14th, the FBI raided the private home of a working reporter, seizing devices and treating the residence like a criminal operation. And the timing is impossible to ignore because the raid came just hours after explosive Pentagon war plans were leaked. But what's raising alarms is that this leak didn't start with the journalist. It came from a government contractor with a high security clearance. And that's the part that's making U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi furious. Although the suspected leaker is already behind bars, Bondi believes he could just be the fall guy for an even bigger conspiracy, which raises the question, how far up does this go, and who stands to benefit from this leak in the first place? The FBI executed a search warrant at the direction of Kash Patel in my office on the reporter's home, seizing the devices that contained classified material regarding our foreign adversaries. The reporter at the center of this is a Washington Post journalist named Hannah Nathanson, with years of experience covering powerful federal agencies that don't like being questioned. And this context is important to really understand why Nathanson became the target of the raid. The Washington Post, this reporter, they're not the focus of this criminal investigation. But by saying that, then you hear the counterargument. Why was this search warrant necessary? What exactly are you looking for? Is this violating federal law? Long before this raid, Nathanson's work had repeatedly put her in direct conflict with government institutions. Her current beat is President Trump's reshaping of the federal government and how those changes are affecting major institutions. That alone puts her in sensitive territory where every report is watched closely and every source matters. Before that, she spent years covering education, a beat that sounds quiet but often crosses into federal funding failures and national security issues.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry we were a little bit late. I was in the West Wing swearing in Tulsi Gabbard, and so I just came straight back here. So thanks for being patient with us with the delay. We're here today because we have filed charges against the state of New York. We have filed charges against Kathy Hochul. We have filed charges against Letitia James and Mark Schroeder, who is with DMD. This is a new DOJ, and we are taking steps to protect Americans, American citizens, and Angel Mom, like the mom standing right behind me, who you're going to hear from in a moment.
Her reporting didn't stay under the radar. In 2024, she won a Peabody Award for a podcast on school gun violence, forcing officials to answer questions they had avoided for years. She was also part of the Washington Post team that won the 2022 Pulitzer Prize for its coverage of January 6th. That reporting exposed serious breakdowns inside federal agencies responsible for protecting the Capitol, and it embarrassed institutions that still haven't fully recovered from it. This is the profile of a reporter who builds records, keeps sources, and documents failures that powerful agencies would rather forget. That's why sources say this wasn't random. Journalists like Nathanson don't just publish headlines. Over time, they become known inside the system. So when sensitive Pentagon war plans suddenly surfaced and panic spread behind closed doors, the focus shifted fast. It wasn't just about the leak anymore. It was about who had the credibility, reach, and backing to make sure those plans didn't quietly disappear.
Listen, neither the Washington Post nor this reporter is the target or focus of the criminal investigation. It does make you wonder, A, what exactly are they searching for, and B, why was a search of the home necessary? However, what really set all of this off was an article written by Nathanson herself, a first-person Washington Post piece titled, "I Am the Post's Federal Government Whisperer. It's Been Brutal." In that article, Nathanson laid out just how deep her access inside the federal government had become. She described a non-stop stream of calls and messages from federal workers coming in day and night, all trying to explain how President Trump was reshaping agencies, firing staff, and changing missions in ways they felt powerless to stop. Nathanson revealed that her reporting had brought her into contact with 1,169 new sources, all current or former federal employees who trusted her with information they knew they weren't supposed to share. She admitted she was learning things people inside the government were never meant to tell a reporter. She also admitted the workload nearly broke her. That kind of honesty blurred the line between transparency and vulnerability. She shared examples of the messages she was receiving. One warned that USAID staff were suddenly being placed on leave with no end date. Another said DOJ officials were inside DHS headquarters reviewing FEMA and CISA, ending with a blunt note, deleting this conversation. Another message showed the human toll, with a worker saying they were trying to escape public service altogether. But the most important part of the article was where Nathanson described growing fear, like she knew she was being watched. She talked about tightening security, using encrypted drives, private browsers, renamed chats, and treating every device like a risk. At the same time, she kept posting publicly on Fed News, sharing her stories and inviting more sources to reach out. As her access grew, her caution grew, and the sense of being watched stopped feeling hypothetical. Because not long after that article ran, the government stopped just reading her reporting and started showing up. We'll start by saying this is unprecedented. FBI agents reading the home of Hannah Nathanson, a Post reporter, seizing 2 laptops, her phone, a Garmin watch. The raid came without warning. Early on in the morning of January 19th, while most people were still asleep, FBI agents showed up unannounced at Hannah Nathanson's home in Virginia. According to accounts later shared inside the Washington Post, agents searched the house and began seizing devices, turning her home into a federal operation with no public explanation and no notice to her newsroom. Agents took her phone, her Garmin watch, and 2 laptops, including one owned by her employer. One by one, the tools she used to do her job were boxed up and removed. But here's the interesting part. Agents told her that she is not their target, but part of a classified documents leak investigation stemming from a Pentagon contractor. But what stunned everyone was that there was no arrest, no charges, no clear reason given on the spot, just agents collecting electronics tied to her reporting, then leaving behind silence. And this wasn't a routine request for records either. There was no subpoena first, no back and forth with lawyers, no attempt to follow the usual rules meant to protect reporters. The approach was direct and forceful, the kind normally reserved for criminal suspects. And at first, it seemed like the agents were trying to send a message about what happens when reporting goes too far. But that wasn't really the case. As the case unraveled, it quickly became obvious that the reason why the raid was forceful was that it went way deeper than just one rogue reporter. It was a matter of national security, and that realization rattled authorities.
We have to protect our classified information and the heroic men and women in the military. And the First Amendment is a bedrock principle, but this isn't about that. It's about classified material that could jeopardize lives.
And now, here's what really making the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi furious, because the war plans at the center of this case were never meant to be public in any form. And sources close to the investigation say these weren't old drafts or forgotten ideas. They were recent, active plans, which were still being worked on behind closed doors. And while these plans haven't been made public, nor are they expected to, it explains why officials went quiet. Almost nothing was said publicly, but privately, the leak was described as dangerous. The fear inside the government was more about damage than embarrassment. According to Bondi, this leak could directly put the lives of active men and women of the military in danger. What's worse is that sources are now linking her name as the person expected to contain the fallout.
We were letting walk into our country. And that's why President Trump has directed this to stop. And if you don't comply with federal law, we will hold you accountable. We did it to Illinois. Strike 1. Strike 2 is New York. And if you are a state not complying with federal law, you're next. Get ready. And the great men and women of law enforcement are standing behind me today. We have FBI, DEF, DEA, ATF agents. They put their lives on the line every single day to protect us.
It is a tremendous escalation by the administration in their intrusion into the independence of the press. The Justice Department has never executed a search warrant at the home of a reporter in a national security leak case.
And the days after the raid and the arrest, the fallout spread fast, turning into a public fight over limits in power. Press freedom groups and civil rights advocates warned that the raid was a gross violation.
They said raiding a reporter's home crossed a dangerous line, even in a national security case. After days of pressure, the government finally revealed what changed everything. The real source of the leak was the Pentagon contractor, Aurelio Luis Perez Lugones, and according to prosecutors, he was the one who moved the classified material out of secure spaces and into the open. The Justice Department revealed that Perez Lugones took classified documents home more than once. He allegedly removed them from protected systems and shared the information with Nathanson's home, and that material later appeared in at least 5 of her published articles. Post also responded clearly, saying it has a long history of defending press freedom and that it stands fully behind its reporter in her work. Former executive editor Marty Barron was even more direct. He called the raid a clear and appalling sign that this administration is willing to push hard against an independent press. His words spread quickly across media circles, already watching this case with concern. However, despite all of this backlash, Bondi has not backed down. In a statement on X, she stated that the Trump administration will not tolerate illegal leaks of classified information that, when reported, pose a risk to our nation's national security and the brave men and women who are serving our country. The Attorney General Pam Bondi joining us live here in studio. AG, thank you so much for coming in.
Sure. This has been hard to watch for everyone involved. Let me just get your initial thoughts of what's happened here in Minneapolis in the last couple of hours. Well, why this has happened in Minneapolis is because you have a mayor, you have a governor who has declared Minneapolis a sanctuary city, saying, bring your worst of the worst to Minneapolis. You're invited here. You will be protected. These are the arrests. These are just the arrest. Just a search warrant to retrieve the information that belongs to the Department of War. But the guy who worked for the Department of War, he is in jail, and he should remain in jail.
According to investigators, this is why the case escalated so fast. Court records lay out a clear pattern. Articles containing classified details were published across several dates, stretching over months. And this wasn't a single mistake. Messages recovered from his phone suggest he knew the risk, including one where he said he was going quiet to see if anyone noticed. For context, Perez Lugones held a top-secret clearance and worked as a contractor with regular access to sensitive intelligence. According to authorities, this is how he managed to take screenshots of classified reports, which he later copied into other files to hide their origin. They also say physical documents marked secret were later found in his car and stored in his home, and this ultimately led to his arrest. He was then charged with 5 counts of unlawfully transmitting and 1 count of unlawfully retaining national defense information. That arrest answered the big question of who leaked the information.